Hello, regular Drews.
Hello. Welcome to episode number 14.
Nancy Drew files case number 39, Suspect Next Door.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
We sure hope so, and we hope you are too.
Join us as we talk Nancy Drew cover to cover and click to click.
Welcome to Regular Nancy Drew. So, what's your first impression of the Suspect Next Door, Corey?
It was so dramatic.
It was very dramatic.
I have an issue with the synopsis on the back of the book here.
Oh, I didn't even read
Do
this.
you have the same copy?
Yeah, I think so.
On the back here, we talk about how, we're investigating because Nikki Masters' boyfriend gets murdered and she gets framed for it. So Nancy's trying to clear her name. But the murder doesn't actually happen until, the climax of the story. I just feel like it was a huge spoiler on the back of the book.
That's true. That's
if you're going to spoil it, it needs to happen in, chapter 2 or 3, not chapter 10 of 17.
That's so interesting. I read the synopsis, but way before I started reading the book. And so I totally forgotten that they mentioned that. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised still when the murder happened. So that's, I guess, good for me. But yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
When I was taking notes, I didn't even bother to write his name down at first because he's about to get murdered anyway. So his name's not really that important. Turns out it is.
He's about to get murdered, so his name is not important?
Which is,
would that make his name extra important?
We don't have to remember him as a suspect or anything. I guess it does make it extra important for the relevance. But I was just the boyfriend, whatever. Not putting his actual name, but.
Well, I loved this book.
Oh, it was really good.
So much. And I think that I've just come to the conclusion that I am just obsessed with any Nancy Drew book that takes place in River Heights.
It's fair, yeah.
I just love the setting. I just love it so much, and the way everybody knows Nancy. I love it.
Oh yeah, we got a lot of good moments like that in this book.
So many. So I'm very excited to talk about it. So, 3 words.
3 words. Theft? Or burglary. Burglary, I guess.
Teenagers. A lot of teenagers. I guess Nancy herself is a teenager, but a lot more teenagers in this book.
High schoolers, yeah.
Yeah, I guess high schoolers. Yeah, we'll say that. Theft, high schoolers. Oh, gosh. Fashion?
Yeah, fashion.
There's a lot of talk about fashion in this book.
Hot guys, because every man in this book is attractive, and we're made sure that we know it.
Oh, no. One of our words has to be sexy or
yes.
steamy. There we go. It'll be steamy. It'll be stealing high schoolers steamy.
There we go.
Because wowee, this book is sizzling hot.
Scandalous.
The hottest Nancy Drew book that's ever been written. I'm calling it right now.
Oh, well, I hope that there's not one more than this, because that's...
I know! This one came very close to, verging on inappropriate, you know? Yeah. But I loved it. I am a romance novel fan, though, so that's probably why. I was give me more.
Yeah.
Give me more. But
I guess we should jump in, because right away we get started with the scandalous scene.
The sexiest, steamiest opener. Ned and Nancy are making out, full on making out in a park, just out in the open in a park. I mean, and it's one thing to be okay, they're making out, but the description of them making out is super intense. Ripple of delight is uttered, long lingering kiss, breath on her ear, leaning against each other, nuzzling. There's a lot going on in this opener.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But anyway, they're engaged in a round of serious necking, and we kind of get some description. It's the end of the summer. It's Ned and Nancy's anniversary in a couple days. And Ned is going to have to go back to school soon. Again, no mention of what Nancy is going to be doing after the close of summer. That's just totally ignored. But Ned is going back to school, and so they are going to be apart. And so I guess that's why they're this hot and heavy, is because they are anticipating the distance that will be between them soon.
Makes sense.
But so they're in the park, and then they see across the way Nikki, who is Nancy's teenage 16-year-old next door neighbor, walking with her boyfriend. And they seem to be fine, holding hands or whatever. But then, like, suddenly they get into like this argument, and Nikki storms off, hops in her car, and leaves her boyfriend there. I think there's like some specific. I don't know if they actually hear them arguing.
I think they're too far away, but it just looks like she's trying to leave, and he's like, "No, wait, come back," kind of thing. But then she does leave.
Right. But, we move on. The next day we are at the mall with Bess and George and Nancy, of course, and we're just shopping, just doing some normal everyday shopping. And they just go into this store. Bess drags them into this store called Vanities, which is this really fancy, very expensive store. Stocks a lot of designer goods, that kind of thing. There is this like gorgeous dress in the window that Bess has to try on, even though she knows she can't afford it. She just has to try it on. So she asks the sales girl, "Hey, you have this dress in a size 7. We're going to talk about that later, too.
Yeah, I have a lot of notes on this one.
A lot to say. And she's like, yeah, let me go check the back, right? Nancy is browsing around the store at the same time, too, and she's looking at their jewelry. They have a lot of turquoise, right? Turquoise jewelry in the store. And she's like looking at it, and she looks on the back, and she notices a jeweler's mark that is a Z. That's going to be important later.
Yeah, keep that in mind.
And then the sales lady comes back out and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We don't have the dress in that size." And Bess asks about the one on the mannequin, but that one's too small. But the owner comes over and is like, "Wait, what do you mean we don't have a dress in that size? We just got a shipment of those dresses in yesterday. Have any been sold?" And she checks, and no, none of those dresses have been sold. And so she goes, "You know what this means? Vanities has been robbed again."
Again, yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Nancy goes over and introduces herself, and they're like, "Wait, you're the Nancy Drew, the investigator?" And she offers her services to the owner to help them figure out what's going on with these robberies. And the owner, of course, accepts right away. The police have already been involved and essentially think that it must be an inside job and that there's not really much they can do. So the owner doesn't see any point in calling the police at this point. She thinks Nancy would be much better equipped to solve the mystery for her. Also, they're having some insurance problems with the insurance company. The insurance company is not very willing to cover this loss.
Right. And the owner even says, she's like, I have 2 other stores. Like, I don't have the time to like stay here and like monitor these employees like super closely. So basically, yeah, that's what she hires Nancy on to do, or hires. We don't actually discuss whether or not Nancy is like on commission for this, or like how exactly, if she's being paid at all. Just seems kind of like
no.
Seems like no. But obviously that's not Nancy's concern. Nancy just, wants to catch the bad guys. So she introduces Nancy to some of the staff there. She introduces her to the manager, Trisha Hayes, who is new to River Heights. And there's kind of like an awkward moment between her and Nancy where she's like, "Oh, yeah, how do you like River Heights?" And she's like, "I don't. It's a small town. It's awful here." And Nancy's like, "Oh, okay. Sorry." The owner, Kate, is like, "She's new to River Heights. Sorry. She's never heard of you. Sorry, Nancy. Yeah. She doesn't know who you are." That's hilarious.
Everyone else in River Heights does know who Nancy is. Don't worry about it.
But Nancy just kind of chuckles. But then we go back to another Ned and Nancy scene. Nancy says she'll come back later, essentially. And we are in another Ned and Nancy date night. And she's telling Ned about her new case. I just can't move on without remarking. I'm just going to read it because...
Yes, please do.
Because, it's just such an iconic... Okay, hold on. So she's talking about the mystery, and Ned's like, "Oh, yeah, just let me know where I can help," or whatever. This is what Ned says. He says, "Did I hear you say help? Sergeant Nickerson of the Yukon at your service, ma'am." He paused to salute. "When do I start?" "I'll let you know," Nancy answered. "But it's nice to know my Mountie is still available."
Nancy!
Oh my God! Well, now we know the kind of role-playing that Ned and Nancy get up to. It is very Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Wow. She even makes a crack about it later in the book. Like, it's apparently this is just like some running gag between them. It is hilarious.
Oh man.
Anyway, I just had to tell you all that because it's just too good. But so they're talking about vampies. They decide to go get pizza, but the pizza place is really crowded, so they decide to take the pizza back to Nancy's porch, and they eat it on the porch very romantically. But while they're sitting on the porch, they see Nancy's neighbor, Nikki, pull up with her boyfriend. And she basically like jumps out of the car and they get into an argument like immediately. He's like, "Nikki, wait, don't go." And he's like trying to convince her to take something. He just says like, "Please take it. You have to take it. Take this thing." And Nikki's like, "Let me go. Like, leave me alone. I can't do this anymore." And then he says, you don't even care about me? You wouldn't even care if I died?" And Nikki says, "Stop trying to make me feel guilty. Leave me alone. If you don't leave me alone, I just might kill you myself." Duh, duh, duh. And so, yeah, she slams the door and goes inside. And Ned and Nancy are like, "Oh, gosh, like, that was dramatic." But Ned's like, don't bother her, Nancy. It's just young love. There's nothing to worry about. But Nancy just kind of keeps that in the back of her mind as something to keep tabs on and potentially check in with Nikki about later. Even though Ned tries to like dissuade her. But yeah.
Then we have a cutscene. There's a lot of cutscenes. We'll just next paragraph will just be a whole different scene. But Nancy goes back to Vanities and she's going to look around a little bit, see what she can find out. She does interview the employees there at Vanities. We have Charlene and her boyfriend Tony, and then there's also Max and of course the store manager Trisha. Is that everybody?
Yes. Yeah, it is. But we also learn that Trisha tells her a little bit about the store and the security of the store. We learn that there's an alarm system, there's video cameras, electronic locks, and there are codes on the front and the back door that she changes every week. Right. So this just kind of confirms that, well, how could this have happened? It has to be somebody who knows the codes, but only Trisha and the owner, Kate Hayes, know these codes, and they are there every day to open the store.
Right. So Nancy decides it must be multiple people working together on this, that one person alone could not have carried out these robberies.
Right. Trisha lets Nancy use her office to interview the staff. Okay, so Tony, one of the employees, Tony won't let Charlene talk to Nancy on her own.
Yeah, Tony's really scary.
Tony is a scary dude. And he also says that he thinks Kate, the owner, is running some kind of insurance scam. And that she's the one who's responsible for these quote-unquote thefts, just to pull one over on her insurance. Yeah, and then we also meet, Max, like you said, and he's the stock boy there. But he says that he's very handsome, apparently. Nancy goes on and on about how he's, like, built. Anyway.
This goes on for, like, a while, her remarking on his appearance. Just every man that Nancy meets in this, it's like, Nancy observed that he was so handsome. Okay.
So true. But he's a stock boy there, and he says that all he does is unload the boxes. He never opens them and looks and sees what's inside. And Nancy's like, that's super weird. The whole job of a stock person is to like unstock the boxes and like inventory the items. Like that's the purpose. But he says he doesn't do that.
He says this is his excuse for like why he wouldn't have access to the merchandise to steal it. I don't open the boxes, so I can't be the one that opened the boxes and stole the stuff. Okay.
I think he's just trying to like deny all knowledge, because she asked him something about like, when did you see this? Like she's trying to like nail down like when like a robbery happened. Gotcha. And he's like, I've never seen any of it. She's like,
I don't even work here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, she's like, that doesn't seem super likely, but whatever. She doesn't push anybody on anything at this point.
I think this is when Nancy goes home and sees Nikki at her house upset. She's got this really fancy necklace in her hand that Nancy recognizes as being really similar to the ones on sale at Vanity's.
She tells her that it's a gift from her boyfriend, Dan Taylor, and that Dan is just having a lot of problems right now, and Nikki doesn't know how to help him, and she's tried to break up with him, but he doesn't want to, which is confusing to me. But she's really young, and Dan's a little bit older. She's 16, and he's 19, and he just like really wanted her to have this necklace, and Nikki now thinks, because of all this trouble or whatever, she thinks that Dan stole this necklace and was trying to give it to her to hold on to. She gives Nancy a little bit more detail about their relationship, like he had just moved to River Heights when they had met, that he's very attractive, also another attractive man, and Jeremy, one of her friends, they were at this party together, and Jeremy called Dan a compulsive liar, and he said that Dan had lied about knowing him and his family, because the Pratts are like these really wealthy people apparently, had said that he knew the Pratts to get a job. And so Jeremy hates Dan off the bat, and really nobody likes Dan. We're getting the vibes that just like everybody thinks Dan is just an awful person, and they're so confused about why Nikki would be going out with him at all. But so Nikki asks Dan about this, confronts him about, you know, what Jeremy said, and he basically like gets really defensive or whatever. And then Nikki starts to realize all this other stuff that he told her about, like all these trips he had taken and how successful he's been, could probably also be lies.
Right. She asked Nancy to take the necklace to look into it some more.
But she does say that she loves him, and she just wants, you know, him to be okay, and is really worried about him and doesn't know what to do. So it's sad. It's sad.
So young to be in that situation. 16 years old. It's really young to be dealing with such difficult circumstances.
He did also send a letter with the necklace that I would like to read this, because Nancy says something very specific about it. So, Nikki, this necklace reminded me of you. Soon our troubles will be over and you'll have lots more gifts. But remember, my life is my gift to you. Please don't break up with me, Nikki. Without you, my life is over. Yours forever, Dan. And then says, a cold shiver made its way up Nancy's spine. Nikki, she said softly, if I were you, I'd break it off with Dan. The sooner the better. Creepy.
She's got an intuition about this.
So she goes back to the store, and she shows Trisha the necklace and says, like, hey, have you ever seen this? It looks really similar or whatever to the stuff. And Trisha's like, no, that is not what we stock here. We only stock really fine jewelry, and that's not.
We don't sell that garbage here.
Right. Oh, this is where Trisha makes the crack about River Heights, and Nancy is like offended on behalf of her town.
Yes.
But so Trisha also gives her the code to the door and shows her all the employee records. And basically, by looking at them, Nancy's like, there's no way to tell when these items had been stolen. Like, there's just a list of stock. And then at a certain point, Trisha had written next to the stock that had been stolen. But, like, there's no dates or anything like that. Also, she's found from the employee records that Trisha's the longest term employee, and she's only been there 6 months. But apparently she has great references from Colorado. She looks at the other employees also, and Max and Tony both have terrible references. Like, Max's is like that he's like always late or something, and Tony's is like he was like aggressive with other employees or something really bad.
Not surprising.
But apparently Kate still hired these people, which is bizarre. Charlene is new. She doesn't have any references. Seems like this is probably her first job.
Right.
So she's just inexperienced. But the other two, it's like, why would you hire these people, Kate? Trisha had earlier like remarked on the fact that Kate is like a bad judge of character. And so
yeah,
we're kind of wondering like, what's going on with that? We did also see that Dan Taylor previously worked at Vanities, but like before the robberies had happened. He had left prior to any of these thefts. So seems and with the fact that the codes on the door changed weekly, doesn't seem likely that he could have been involved in the string of thefts, because how would he have been able to get into the store?
Things just aren't adding up.
Yeah,
the way they should be. Yeah,
it's curious. It's a curious case.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing more Nancy can do. The store is closed. So she goes to the movies with Bess and George.
Yay, movie night. But then we see the entire staff of Vanities when we arrive there.
Max and Charlene are there together, which is interesting. Or no, are they there together? They're just there separately, but they're there at the same time. I
read it as them being there together, but
I did too.
Yeah.
Whatever. Trisha's also there, and she is coming at a movie with a guy in a cowboy hat. Ooh, scandalous. Trisha on a date.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of tries to like avoid Nancy. She sees her, and then she kind of like walks the other way. And so Nancy's like, interesting. Oh, yeah. And so after the movie, she comes back to her house, and when she is going up to her door, she sees someone in the bushes next to Nikki's house. They flee, they kind of run out, and she sees that it's Dan Taylor, her boyfriend, who jumps in his car and like flees. And so Nancy follows him. And she follows him to the arcade where he goes in and then comes back out, and Max beats him up. Mm-hmm. And Nancy's like really torn. She's like, oh gosh, do I like jump in and like interfere to like stop this or whatever? But he pulls back, I guess. And at that point, Nancy approaches. Dan is like, hey, who are you? What do you want? And basically Nancy's like, well, I saw you at Nikki's house. And he's like, you followed me here. And he's like, well, whatever. I'm not going to talk to you. And basically just like waits to do anything until she leaves.
Right.
Once she does start to leave, he goes back into the arcade.
Right.
Which is like, the guy who just beat you up is in there. Maybe you should just not do that. But Nancy can't get any more information out of him.
She tells Nikki.
She goes back
home. She tells Nikki that he got beat up, but leaves out the part about him like prowling around her house and who he got beat up by and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think Nikki knows that he was prowling around her house because she tells Nancy that Dan like kept trying to get Nikki to let him in earlier. He was like banging on the door and be like, let me in. Her parents weren't home.
Oh, that's right.
And so she just ignored him and didn't answer the door. And so she knew he was there. And I guess he was trying to find a way into the house, which is terrifying, by the way. But he doesn't get it, and he ends up running off when Nancy drives up. But yeah, so she also doesn't tell Nikki about the thefts at Vanities or like anything that she suspects Dan might be involved in.
Right.
Because she doesn't have proof, which is fair enough. But Nikki is also like really upset at this point, which is fair. Her boyfriend is trying to like force his way into her house.
She should be terrified. Ex-boyfriend at this point, probably.
Well, kind of, but she's
sort of breaking up.
She has unsuccessfully broken up with.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, but then she gets another call from Trisha saying...
Well, this is the next morning.
Sorry,
go ahead. Morning. No. I was just going to say she goes to bed, and then the next morning she gets the call. Yeah.
Gotcha. So she gets the call from Trisha saying that there's been a huge robbery this time and she needs to get down to Vanities right away.
Mm-hmm. And Nancy just like kicks herself for not staking out the store that night. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I could have solved this case night one had I done the stakeout.
Well, she also gets like a little bit of sass from Trisha. And it's like, well, Nancy, you were being lazy and slacking off and going to the movies last night. I saw you there and you should have been working, and Kate's going to be so mad at you. Like, Kate's not her boss. She's not even getting paid for this.
Apparently she's not getting paid. Like we don't know, to be fair. They don't really talk about it. But Nancy like feels kind of bad about it too. Yeah. And she just kind of was like, oh, you're right, Trisha. Like that. Come on, Nancy.
Thanks, Trisha.
Need some spunk at this point. But she also makes a point to say that she's trying not to get into an argument with Trisha right now because she doesn't want to, obviously, make her angry because she's a suspect.
Right.
So she's at the store, and we find out that a lot of different clothes have been stolen, some really expensive some designer clothes, which I looked up is not a real designer. I was like, who is that? No, nobody, not real. And also all of the turquoise jewelry in the store, all of it has been stolen. And so she overhears Kate on the phone with the insurance company in the office, and they do not want to reimburse her for this theft. Basically, they don't believe her that these things have been stolen, and they actually even threaten to drop her policy. So it doesn't really seem like it's likely that insurance fraud could be going on, because if it is, it's at least not succeeding.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, they tell her if there's even one more robbery, then she's done for. And
right.
Kate thinks she'll lose the store completely at that point, or the stores, I guess, plural, since she has other.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't seem likely that Kate would keep pushing this with her insurance company being so threatening. So Nancy also brings up Dan to Trisha as being a possible suspect, and Trisha says that Dan is not smart enough to be behind this, that she, he was here for a little while, but he's too stupid to pull off this crime. She asks all the other staff about their alibis, basically, too, and Tony says that he was homesick last night. Max says he was at the arcade all night, and Nancy's like, didn't I see you at the movies too? And he's like, oh yeah, I did. I stopped by the movies just for a few minutes just to see a friend. And she was like, oh, curious, they let you back without a ticket? He's like, yeah.
Yeah, they're all really shady with their answers of what they were doing last night. And yeah, it was. And
Charlene.
Everyone's being evasive.
Yeah, Charlene does say she was at the movies, but Nancy asks her what movies she's seen. And basically she's like, oh, I saw this movie. And Nancy's like, oh, what was it about? And Charlene, gives this whole spiel about what the movie was about. But Nancy has seen this movie and knows that is not what the movie is about. Right. She knows Charlene is lying. And she wouldn't lie about what movie she saw, so clearly she's lying about being at the movies at all.
Right.
So bizarre. So she goes home, and Nikki calls Nancy in a panic. And Nancy goes over to her house, and Nikki says that Dan jumped out at her from the bushes of her house, and that he looked terrible. His face was all swollen and bloodied or whatever from when he was beaten up. And he tried to get her to take another gift from him in like this envelope, but she wouldn't. She refused to. But again, she's just really worried about him. And, what is there anything Nancy can do? And she asked Nancy to go talk to his parents, which she does agree to do.
And with this envelope, he begs her to take it, so she doesn't even need to open it. She just needs to take it from him, and she refuses. So we don't actually know what's in this envelope just yet. Right.
Or is it a gift? It doesn't seem like a gift if you don't need to open it. That's weird.
He just wants her to have it. Yeah.
So Nancy agrees to go talk to his parents, but she also encourages Nikki to get out of the house and go hang out with her friends, because she's really, she just seems really stressed out, obviously. And so Nikki says, okay, yes, I can go hang out with my friends. Jeremy Pratt is having a party tonight, and I will be there. And Dan will not be there because Jeremy hates Dan. So, so that seems like a safe place for her to be for the time being. Nancy also calls Ned and makes a plan with him to stake out Vanity's that night. And that she'll meet up at 9 at the ice cream parlor across from Vanity's. And he's like, yes, absolutely. There's nothing I would like more to do
than to sit on a stakeout with you all night, Nancy. I will be there. But then Bess and George show up breathless at her front door and barge in with this whole story.
Yeah, they say that they were doing recon at Vanity's for her, which I think is supposed to be code for that Bess wanted to go shopping again. Right. And I think what that was supposed to be. But they say that while they were at Vanity's, Trisha's boyfriend was there. He was wearing a cowboy hat. He was from
making out while she was at work.
I know.
Scandalous.
So scandalous. They also say that they gleaned the fact that he was from Denver. That makes sense. That tracks too. Trisha's also from Denver. We know that. And that Max passed Charlene a note that scared her. She as soon as she read the note that Max gave her, she got all faint. Creepy.
Suspicious, yeah.
But then while they're talking, someone throws a brick through Nancy's window, Which I thought when I read this, I was like, this seems premature. Like, this seems early in the story for this kind of thing to happen. Maybe it's not. I don't really know. But there is a note on the brick, and it says, next time this brick won't just break a window. Back off, Nancy Drew. Ooh. Nancy is, of course, just absolutely unfazed by this and just like immediately calls the window repairman, which I guess she probably has to do every other week anyway.
Right. She's probably on speed dial.
Yeah, she got like an account open with this glazier who's going to come fix her windows.
Her close personal friend, the window fixing guy.
Yeah.
But he's really late. He takes his own sweet time, and she's supposed to meet Ned at 9, and she wanted to stop and talk to Dan's parents on the way, but it's already like 8:30, and she's waiting around, getting really anxious about having to go. But then Hannah comes home unexpected. Both Carson and Hannah have been away, but Hannah comes home early, and she says, Nancy, you go. I'll stay here with the window guy.
Aw, Hannah.
I know. It's such a nice... We only get that one scene with her in the whole book, but
yeah,
it was nice. She's
also,
still there.
I don't want to jump the gun or anything, but we also don't get any scenes with Carson, even though he is like in the book. Like he plays a role like later on, but we don't actually ever see him or speak to him. Just thought that was funny.
We leave a note for him, and then we find out that Nikki talked to him at one point, and then that's it.
Yeah, he's just like around. He's just around, but we just don't like ever see him.
No dialogue with him.
No.
Like that. He exists. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So Nancy goes by the Taylor's house, and Nancy lies to Mrs. Taylor, or I guess she doesn't lie. Mrs. Taylor makes an assumption that Nancy has a crush on Dan, and Nancy just goes along.
Believe it. Yeah. She's like, I don't want to correct this woman, and she seems to have a real distaste for Nikki, so I'm not going to let on that I'm friends with Nikki or anything of that nature. And she's just like, oh, well, you sweet girl, you're already so much better than Nikki.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're dating my son. She just tries to get a little bit more information out of Mom, lets her know that she's worried about him, and Mom's just like, oh no, it's totally fine. A shelf fell on him. That's why he's so bruised up and has a black eye and all that stuff.
Yeah. She also like really, really bad mouths Nikki. Like she's like, I hate that girl. She's terrible. She's a liar. She calls her a liar. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it's just very clear that they really don't like Nikki in the house. She also still believes that he's working at Vanities, which is interesting. So Dan's been lying to his mom and says that he's still doing business trips and taking business for Vanities. And he also is very successful. She just really thinks the world of her son and that, like nothing is wrong. Mm-hmm. She also, Nancy asks where Dan is that night. And she says, oh, he's going to a party with his friend, Jeremy Pratt.
No, he's not.
Uh-oh. So Nancy immediately freaks out, and she's like, I have got to get over there because he is going to go try to confront Nikki again. So she locates the Pratt house, and Nancy knows that she is super late at this point to meet Ned, but she feels compelled. She has to check on Nikki. She's worried about Nikki's safety. So she walks up to the Pratt's house. And she doesn't really want to go inside without so polite Nancy. Nancy's manners are like on point here. She's like, oh, is Jeremy Pratt here? I haven't been invited by the host. I need to introduce myself to the host before I can just jump in on a party, which is hilarious because it's like a house party with like teenagers. And there's this kid on the porch. He has a name, but I don't remember. It's not important. No. Who is like, oh, no, you can just go in or whatever. But Nancy says that he is like all but 14 or like all but 15 or something. He's like really young. And he's like, hey, Nancy, save a dance for me later or whatever. And Nancy winks at him.
It's like, sure.
It's freaking creepy, Nancy.
It is. It was weird.
But she goes inside. And she sees a couple girls like looking concerned over talking by themselves. And she, on just like a hunch, goes up to them and says, hey, I'm looking for Nikki. Have you seen Nikki? And they're like, oh, yeah, we're her friends or whatever. And she just went outside because Dan Taylor showed up and asked to talk to her. Mm-hmm. Yikes.
Like, oh, and also Jeremy is nowhere to be found at this party because he left a little while ago to go get, quote unquote, get more soda for the party. Mm-hmm. But Nancy observes that there's plenty of food and drink available at the house, so it's Like they're not about to run out of soda anytime soon, so that's just a little suspicious.
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. So Dan said that he wanted to talk to Nikki privately, so they give them a couple more minutes to talk, but then they, at a certain point, they're like, okay, it's been a few minutes, let's go out and check on them. But when they go out onto the porch, Nikki and Dan are nowhere to be seen. Seems like Dan's car is also gone from the driveway. There's this other girl out there named Brittany who kind of like teases them and is like,
and she'd like to know where your friend is, don't you? And they're like, yeah, obviously. Tell us. And she's like, wouldn't you like to know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. But they go back inside and somebody else tells them that, yeah, they saw Nikki get into the car with Dan and drive off. So there's like nothing really to do because they don't know where they went. Nobody knows where they went. So they just kind of have to wait around. So Nancy waits around there. And at about 11, Nikki opens the door and is all scratched and muddy and her clothes have been torn and she's like drenched somehow.
Oh, it's been raining.
Oh, okay.
It's been raining, so yeah. So she's drenched, but she's a mess when she comes in, and she just immediately faints when she comes through the door. Mm-hmm. So they get her up, they get her some water, and get her to tell her story of what happened.
Yeah, she starts sobbing, and so they take her to like a private room, and Nancy tries to like dispel the crowd. And Nikki says she isn't hurt, and they like are like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you're not hurt?" And she says no. She says that Dan had showed up and he was like actually talking reasonably for once. You know, she agreed to talk to him in the backyard and he apologized for like scaring her before and that he was sorry. And she says like, okay, thanks or whatever. But like now, like it's over, like it's really over or no longer doing this. And he doesn't say anything to this, but he asks her to like go on a ride with him in his car. And for some reason, this girl agrees to. Baffling. And so they go for a drive in his car. And she just thinks that, you know, maybe he has to just run an errand and doesn't want to say goodbye yet or whatever. So I guess for old time's sake, she goes with him. But he won't tell Nikki where they're going. And she gets really nervous when he pulls off the road into the woods.
Right. Just into a trail that leads into the middle of the woods.
Oh,
in the dark, in the rain.
This is terrifying.
Girl, you need Nikki to run.
So he pulls off the road and then he pulls out the envelope and he tries to get Nikki to take this envelope again. And he even tries to like shove it in her purse when she like refuses to not take it. He tries to put it in her purse. And so at that point, Nikki just tries to run.
Yeah, his whole demeanor changes as well. Yeah.
Right. But he grabs her to, I guess, like try to stop her from going or something. And so she is able to like scratch him and get away. And she just runs. She just runs out of the woods, eventually finds, you know, the way up to the main road and back to Jeremy's house, to the party. Yikes.
Then Brittany pokes her head back in and tells them that Nikki's friend's mom called and says they need to get home. So Nancy says, all right, party's over for the four of us. I'll drop you guys off at home and then take Nikki home as well.
Mm-hmm. So she is, after she drops off Nikki, Nikki's like, oh, aren't you going to go into your house or park or whatever? And Nancy's like, no, I've got something I got to do. So after she drops off Nikki, she drives back around to where Nikki kind of said that they were. And as she is like driving down that road, there is an ambulance and police cars.
Mm-hmm. She sees a bunch of
flashing lights.
Yeah. Hears the sirens and starts to get pretty nervous.
Yeah. So she pulls off, she pulls over and Officer Nolan is there, who apparently she is already acquainted with. Mm-hmm. And he says, yeah, looks like some guy was murdered here.
And there's his car. And then he finds his flashlight and it's Dan's car.
Yeah.
And Nancy starts to feel kind of weak. She sees Chief McGinnis. Oh, no.
Brenda Carlton!
Brenda Carlton shows up. Here she comes in her news van asking Nancy if she knows anything about the victim. If you're not already familiar, Brenda Carlton is a River Heights reporter who likes to use sneaky methods to get her news stories. And so Nancy, of course, does not want to talk to her.
I had no idea that Brenda was like a legitimate character in a Nancy Drew series until I saw this, and I like looked it up because it seemed like Nancy like already knew who she was. Mm-hmm. And Brenda Carlton is in like a ton of Nancy Drew files. She's a recurring character in the Nancy Drew files.
I'd be really disappointed if she wasn't.
I'm so pumped, and I'm so excited to see more of Brenda Carlton in any more Nancy Drew files.
Brenda.
Brenda Carlton is obviously our alternate universe Nancy Drew. If Nancy Drew did not have a very strong moral center, she would be Brenda Carlton. And so she's foiled Nancy, but, you know, we love Brenda around here. I love Brenda, at least.
I love to hate her.
Yeah.
She's just so frustrating, and she is a little unscrupulous when it comes to her headlines, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, she has like some banter with Nancy. Nancy's like, can't you report on the actual news for once, Brenda? And Brenda just like keeps trying to like pump her for information, but she just basically, Nancy shuts her down.
This is when Chief McGinnis comes over, and Brenda's in the corner like scribbling down everything he says.
It's just a really great scene. It's just one of those like just classic River Heights scenes. It's why I love River Heights so much. Is like there's that person there that you know. It's basically, so if you played Alibi and Ashes, the PC game, it's just as Nancy is coming out of the burning building. That's the scene. There's sirens, there's Chief McGinnis, there's Brenda Carlton. That's the scene.
Right.
But yeah, so she talks to Chief McGinnis, and because Brenda's listening in, she's like, okay, well, you know, let's talk later. But Chief, hey, can you give me the tour before we go? And so he shows her the crime scene. I just, like, as much as I understand that this is because it's Nancy Drew, like, and she is like this established detective or whatever, at least in River Heights, and he trusts her and everything. But just the idea of like a cop just being like, sure, random citizen, like, here's the crime scene.
They've already taken the body away at this point, but still.
But he shows her the car, apparently tells her that the victim, Dan, was hit on the forehead with a rock, and that's how he was murdered. Mm-hmm. And there was that his watch was smashed, and very handily so, because it gave them the exact time of death, which was 10:14 p.m.
And remember, Nikki didn't get back to the party until just before 11. Mm-hmm. So this does not look good.
Yeah. And so he shows her the car, and inside of the car is Nikki's dark blue purse. And so, yeah, things are just not looking good for our friend Nikki. Nancy drives the chief back to the station in her car, which I thought was so precious. And she talks to him on the way there and tells him all about Dan and Nikki's relationship, about the thefts at Vanities. But she says, look, like, Chief, like, I know this girl, it can't be her. She can't have done this or committed these crimes. Mm-hmm. And the chief is like, well, Nancy, that's all well and good or whatever, but I can't go off a hunch. I have to go off the evidence, and all the evidence points to Nikki. Mm-hmm. And so they get to the station, and he shows her Nikki's bag, but there's no envelope in Nikki's bag.
Mm-hmm. Which we know he tried to put it in her purse. So where is the envelope? It's not in the car anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And so, the chief says there was no envelope anywhere at the scene. They didn't find an envelope.
They can't even be sure that there really was an envelope. We just have Nikki's word about this.
Mm-hmm. And so Nancy is like, look, Chief, I get it or whatever, but can you just give me 48 hours to investigate this, and I'll get back to you with, more solid evidence. And he says, I'll give you 24 hours. But then right when he says that, a police officer comes into the room and tells him, like, hey, Chief, we also found this at the scene. And it's a picture of a drawn N in the ground. It looks like Dan must have scrawled that letter N into the ground as he was dying.
Mm-hmm. With his fingernails, and there's dirt under his nails and everything. Yeah. So Chief McGinnis is like, well, that does it. I got to go arrest this girl in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which I also thought was interesting, because I was like, why aren't you arresting her like right now?
Right.
But whatever.
And side note, Ned is still at Vanities waiting for us. Mm-hmm. And it's like 3 a.m. probably at this point.
Nancy goes home, and I guess she gets a good night's sleep, but she goes over to the master's house early to try to warn them. But they already know about Dan's murder because it's in the paper. Brenda Carlton has written an article that says, Dan Taylor murdered, police seek girlfriend for questioning. And so they're really upset. They know what's coming, right? Nikki's crying. Nikki's mom is crying. And Nikki even says, what if I blacked out and I just don't remember killing him, Nancy?
Nancy's like, no.
At that point, I'm thinking, like, wait a second, is Nikki guilty?
Is that what happened here?
Because that is such like a classic murderer thing to say, being like, well, I must have just blacked out, But Nancy's like assures her, like, no, Nikki, you didn't black out. You didn't kill Dan.
She's like, you know what? My dad gets home tonight. I'm going to get him on your case. But until then, the police are going to have to arrest you. But don't worry, because I'm going to be out there clearing your name while you're in the police station.
She does tell them now about the robberies at Vanities and suspecting that Dan is somehow involved at that. And not to worry, because she's going to be looking into that. So the police show up to arrest Nikki, and they take her away, and they won't let her parents come with her, which I was very confused about.
I thought 16-year-olds had to have some sort of guardian.
Have a guardian present, right? When they're being interviewed by police. Or at the very least, some kind of representation. Like if not a parent, then you have to have a youth advocate or something in the room. Yeah.
Or a lawyer, yeah.
Yeah. Yikes.
And Nancy's just like, don't say anything until my dad gets there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Nancy goes back home, and she gets a call from Ned, who says hey, where were you?
What happened last night?
Nancy's like, oh, sorry, Ned. Dan Taylor was murdered, and so I got a little sidetracked. And Ned is like, absolutely no worries. Don't even worry about it, Nancy. It's totally fine. I know you love... Oh, he does say, I know you love me in spite of the evidence.
Oh.
Ouch! That one's kind of painful.
Yeah.
And apparently she also forgot their anniversary.
Which is the same day, right?
Yeah, because he says happy anniversary, and she's like...
Oh, right. Yeah, you do.
But he is very, very forgiving, almost to the point of being too forgiving, I was like, Ned, you should stand up for yourself a little bit. She just absolutely stood you up. But it's probably not unusual at this point for Ned. Ned might be a little used to it. So he says, call me when you need me, basically. So then Nancy goes to track down Jeremy Pratt to get his alibi, because he was acting suspiciously at the party, having been gone. And he's golfing at the country club. This 16-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Just doing this classically 50-year-old man activity.
Right. Just on his Saturday, whatever.
But his alibi is that he was back at the party by 10, which Nancy should know this because she was there.
Right.
So I didn't really understand this. The need for this, but whatever. Then she goes to the police station because she has a little bit of time before Vanities is going to open, and she wants to check on Nikki. And so she goes there, and they're done questioning her, apparently, but they will need to question her a little bit later as soon as Carson gets back into town. And so she asks, okay, can I take her home? And they let her take Nikki home.
So I guess she's not under arrest just yet?
Okay. No. Yeah, she's not under arrest. They were just questioning her. But as they are going out the door and getting into Nancy's car, there is another car full of teenagers nearby, and the person in the passenger seat rolls down the window and shouts "murderer" at Nikki. Super sad. And Nikki is really upset about it. And I was like, this is what it's going to be like. Everybody's going to think that, I killed Dan. And Nancy just tries to reassure her and is like, don't worry, Nikki, you'll find out who your true friends are. Other people have survived this. You'll survive this. Whew. But it's just rough for our friend Nikki.
Oh, I know. At this point, Nancy is convinced that there is a link between the Vanities robbery and the murder.
Yeah, so she drops off Nikki, and then she heads over to Vanities. Charlene is out sick that day. She does tell Trisha about Dan's murder. She also asks to talk to Max and asks, she gets Trisha's alibi first. And she says that she was with Kate Hayes at a dinner with clients from LA until 11. So she, has a good alibi. She asks for Max's alibi as well. And he tells Nancy that he doesn't tell Nancy where he was, but he tells her that he only beat up Dan the other day because Dan owed him $200. And yeah, that's annoying or whatever, but $200 is not enough to kill someone for. So I didn't do it.
Don't worry.
And Nancy's like, okay. Nancy's like, that makes sense. Why would you kill somebody for $200? And it just never occurs to Nancy. It just seems like it doesn't occur to Nancy in these books that someone might be lying. We had the same issue in 2 Points to Murder where it's just she just take people at their word, even though it's this person is really creepy and acting really suspiciously. But okay.
It's also inappropriate to beat them up over $200, but he had enough of waiting around for his money.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, so Nancy kind of hitting these dead ends. She decides to call Nikki one more time to kind of go over her story from the night before about what happened. And she tells Nancy something that she didn't tell her originally, and that is that while they were driving, they stopped at a convenience store to get sodas, and Dan made a phone call. And apparently it was a really intense conversation. And Nancy's like, oh, why didn't you tell me about this before? And she's like, oh, I didn't think it was important.
Clearly not. Nancy's like, well, obviously he said something to his murderer that made him worth murdering at this point.
Right. So Nancy goes to the police department and is like, I'm so close, Chief. I've almost got it or whatever. Can I mess up your desk? Which is funny. It's just supposed to be a joke because his desk is apparently just classically messy, like always messy. I just love that there's just a crack. There's just an inside joke about Chief McGinnis's desk in this book. It's just great.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, sure, go ahead, Nancy. Yeah. Let me leave you alone with confidential case documents.
All this evidence is what she's reviewing on his desk. He's like, yeah, absolutely. Here you go, Nancy. I'm going to leave you alone.
Have at the police chief's office. Whatever you want.
What could go wrong? I just have to say, I know Nancy is just supposed to be this beacon of morality, which I talked about before, and that is why this is acceptable. But no time in the history of any private detective ever has there been this level of cooperation from
right.
I feel like classically, historically, according to a lot of popular fiction in every movie you've ever seen, every television show, the police are supposed to be at odds with the private detectives. The private detectives are trying to investigate in spite of the police's attempts to stop them.
Right.
It's just amazing to me that they just have this relationship. But yeah, I think it's great. So she's poring over this evidence. She's trying to connect the dots. She's like, I'm so close. I can feel it. I'm so close. She looks again at the N scratched in the dirt by Dan and realizes that it looks kind of funny. It's kind of wonky. It's kind of weirdly spread out. And she realizes that it is in fact not an N, but a Z, a sideways Z. And then she's like, oh, that's so familiar. Where have I seen a Z before? But she can't quite make the connection. Even though us as the reader at this point, we're screaming at her, Nancy! We know where the Z is from, but Nancy doesn't. Right.
She then decides that she's going to go tail Max after Vanities closes and see where he goes after work.
Mm-hmm. Because he didn't give her an alibi before, I assume is why.
Right.
So she follows him to Riverview Park, which I guess is the same park that she and Ned were hooking up in before. Mm-hmm. And she's following him through the park, running tree to tree, hiding behind the trees, which is just a great mental image of Nancy. And then she sees that he meets up with this mysterious stranger in the shadows, and she gets a little closer, and we see that it is Charlene.
Ooh.
But then he goes to wrap his arms around her neck, and Nancy is like about to like jump out to try to stop Max from presumably murdering this girl.
Yeah.
But then instead, he leans in for a deep, passionate kiss.
Of course he does.
So Nancy is shocked. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. The word that they use is sizzling kiss. Yes. Not passionate. Sizzling.
Everything is sizzling.
Nancy's shocked by this, and Charlene sees Nancy hiding, and she gets really scared and oh, Nancy, please don't tell Tony about this. Please don't tell my boyfriend about this. And she says there's no telling what he would do to me if he found out about this. She also tells Nancy that she and Max were together last night and that neither of them were responsible for Dan's murder because they were together all night. And she says that Tony was busy at a family get-together, too. They made sure that he was busy before they planned their romantic rendezvous. And so he couldn't have been responsible either.
Right.
So
they're in love, and she's going to break it off with Tony eventually.
Right.
But when she stopped being scared of what he's going to do.
Gosh.
Yikes.
So Nancy's like, yeah, don't worry, I won't tell anybody. But now, like, everybody from Vanity seems to have a solid alibi for when Dan was killed, and it doesn't make any sense. So she keeps coming back to this watch. She can't figure out how it's possible for Dan to have been murdered at that time with Nikki there. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, she kind of just lays some stuff out for us as the reader at this point. And it's like, okay, so, Dan was trying to get Nikki to hold on to something. This must have been evidence, right? Evidence of these thefts, and wanted to give it to Nikki to hold on to in case something happened to him. He was talking about wanting to turn over a new leaf. And we know that he's been really scared recently and been erratic and acting strangely. So that must mean that he knew or was suspecting that something might happen to him. And so if that were to happen to him, he wanted someone innocent to be able to have evidence of these thefts.
So she kind of puts together that whatever is in that envelope must be the secret about whoever the murderer is.
Right.
It must connect to the murderer.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, she remembers, she makes the connection with the envelope and the gift that Nikki showed her earlier, that Z is the mark that's on the back of all of the jewelry, the stolen jewelry, the jewelry that Dan gave to Nikki, the jewelry in Vanities. And so Nancy runs back to Vanities really quick right before the store closes, checks the store ledger, and she finds the Z means that it's from a place called Zeros in Denver, Colorado. Fascinating. Where do we know Denver from? Oh, yeah, Cowboy Hat Boyfriend. Trisha's boyfriend is from Denver. Trisha is from Denver, too. Curiouser and curiouser. So Nancy, at this point, she's solved it, right? She knows who's responsible for all of this. And so she just has one more connection to make, right? And that's how Dan fits into this. And so she runs back to the Taylor's house and asks his mom to let her look at Dan's things. And so she does. I have a question here because she lets her into Dan's room. And Nancy makes a note of a fake newspaper headline that he has framed on his wall or something that says, Dan Taylor makes first million. Are we supposed to understand that he made this fake headline to fool his mom into thinking that he was a millionaire?
I think so. But wouldn't she figure it out pretty quickly?
He's living at home.
Right.
What millionaire lives at home? Or the only other explanation is that he made that in some kind of aspirational, vision boardy,
just speaking it into existence.
Yeah.
Manifest it.
Which both of them seem just wildly ridiculous to me. But anyway, I just thought that was notable that we should mention that. But so she looks around his room a little bit more too. She doesn't see anything until she sees a suitcase sticking out from under the bed, which she looks at. And there's still an airline tag on there that says DVR, Denver Airport. Mm-hmm. So she asks Mrs. Taylor, and she's like, oh yeah, Dan just came back from Denver on Friday.
On business.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So maybe he really has been doing a little bit of work, just not for vanities.
Right. So she's like, okay, now I understand what's been going on. And she decides to spring a trap with Nikki and Ned. She calls Ned and asks to meet them at the ice cream parlor again and to bring a starter pistol and fake blood.
She says, don't worry, you can get the starter pistol
at any sporting goods store.
Sporting goods store. And the blood, party store, probably. You'll find it. Don't worry.
But, right, Ned comes in clutch. He does indeed find those things and shows up promptly at 6:30. And he even makes, like, he says something about, like, see, I'm on time, Nancy.
These Nickersons are punctual.
Uh-huh. So first Nancy goes into Vanities and Charlene is there and she says, okay, Charlene, I need you and both Max and Tony. I need everybody out of the store like by 5 minutes to 7. She doesn't tell her why, but Charlene's like, okay. And I guess does that. And then she meets up with Ned and Nikki at the ice cream parlor. And she says, hey, happy anniversary, Ned. Here's a present. It's a radio/recorder. And also I need you to use it right now.
Right. Sorry I didn't wrap it because you got to start recording right now.
So she gives him the recorder and they all go over to Vanities and hide in the stock room. Ned hits record on the recorder and then Trisha, walks in and goes into the office and Ned jumps out and he says, I know all about Dan and the Denver connection. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what are you doing here or whatever? And he says, I know about the guy in the cowboy hat. You're in on it together with him. She's all, how do you know this? What's going on? What do you want from me? And Ned says, I want in. I want to take Dan Taylor's place in the little robbery ring that you have going on. And this is when Nancy and Nikki they're both hiding behind crates or whatever. Nancy taps Nikki in. And Nikki jumps up with the starter pistol. Or no, she doesn't pull out the starter pistol yet.
Well, I think Ned starts talking about the insurance policy first.
What does he say?
He has the envelope or something about the envelope. And she's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm Dan's friend. Think of me as his insurance policy. I'm here in case something happens to him. So what you're going to do is let me in on this. Otherwise, things are going to go south for you. And she's still just like, I don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. And then Nancy taps Nikki in. Right?
Yeah. And she says, I know that you killed Dan, but she's pointing the gun at Ned. Mm-hmm. She then takes the gun and shoots at Ned. And the fake, Ned uses the fake blood. Yeah. And slumps to the ground.
The wall,
yeah, pretending to be shot. And then Nikki turns the gun on Trisha. And then this is where Trisha breaks down. She said, please don't kill me, or I didn't kill him. And then Nikki says, you have 10 seconds to tell me who did kill him, or I'm going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And then she says, it's Alan Harrow. He is our supplier from Denver.
Which is Cowboy Hat Man.
Cowboy Hat Man, Trisha's boyfriend. Mm-hmm. Woo! And we have that confession on tape now. And so Nancy calls up the chief. Ring, ring, Chief McGinnis. I've solved Dan Taylor's murder.
And cutscene back to Nikki's house where they are celebrating.
I
guess that's the thing to celebrate. There was still a murder.
The boyfriend's still dead.
Right.
Yikes. But yeah, Nancy starts to explain a little bit. She explains about the, robbery ring that Trisha stole from Vanities, then sent all of the stolen goods to Denver via Dan. And then this guy, Al, took all of these stolen goods to resell them, gave Dan a cut from that, and then Dan took Trisha's cut back to her.
Mm-hmm.
She also explains the watch thing and about why it was possible for it to be set at 10:25 or 10:24, whatever it was. And she says that the watch was actually still on Denver time because Dan had just gotten back on Friday and had not changed his watch back. And so really it was an hour later than what the watch said. Oh, and so, but then there was like one weird thing. It's like, well, then why did Trisha's the one who told Kate about the thefts. Why did she do that? And then Nancy's like, it's because Charlene had just noticed the thefts and was just about to tell her. And so Trisha told her before she had a chance.
So she didn't look like a bad manager or whatever.
Right. Oh,
not smart, Trisha. Not smart.
No. And that's the resolution to our mystery. And then there's this really great tiny little moment between Ned and Nancy where Ned gives Nancy her anniversary present, and it's a little gold bracelet. How come Nancy always gets bracelets at the end of books?
Her wrist must be stacked.
And then there's this great moment where, Nancy's like, I didn't trust Trisha from the beginning. And Ned's like, oh, yeah, why not? And she says, she didn't like living in River Heights. Can you imagine anyone not liking River Heights?
Aww. And we do know that this story starts the spinoff series River Heights, that Nikki Masters is, I guess, the star of that series. So just a fun little, who doesn't love River Heights?
Yeah, that's our little call to those books. Yeah. Very cute. Very cute.
What a good one.
I love it so much. I just truly do. All of the salacious, sizzling details.
So sizzling.
All of the interaction with like everybody who like knows Nancy. I was missing our Carson interaction. I wish we could have had some time with Carson, but otherwise, I mean, just amazing. Like just our whole cast of characters is there. Everybody gets their screen time, as it were.
Right.
I love it. Okay. Honestly, I was just reviewing my notes, and aside from all of like the like gasps that I had about like all of the sexy moments in this book, I don't have a whole lot to say. I think my like the thing that icked me out the most about this book was just the way that they like talked about, aside from like obviously all of the representations of abusive relationships, like between Nikki and Dan, and then also between Charlene and Tony, is just the way that they treat Nikki and like the teenager versus like adult thing. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was the age difference thing was like super icky, and like the way Nancy talks about Nikki specifically. There's a point where I'm going to read it. Nikki's like really upset. This is like right after Dan had like jumped out of the bushes at her or something.
Oh yeah.
And Nancy encourages her to go to the party to like try to chill out, And she says, Nancy's describing Nikki. She looked worlds better than when Nancy had come in. The color was back in her cheeks, and there was a spring in her step. Suddenly, Nikki looked 16 again, fresh and radiant.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember that.
Fresh? There's something really creepy and disturbing about describing a 16-year-old girl as fresh.
Right. I don't like that at all.
Ick. And then also Nancy flirting with this 14-year-old boy at Jeremy Pratt's party.
Right.
Like, what the heck is going on with that in this book?
That was really strange.
Because Nancy is an adult. She's supposed to be 18, 19. Like, right. This is like, you literally say he's like barely 15 is what you say about this boy. Gross, Nancy!
I thought maybe she was just trying to appease him by saying like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll dance with you. But then she starts winking at him. And she talks to him again later. It's like, leave. Just leave the party. This is not a party for you, Nancy.
No. So that was, honestly, that's the only thing I really have to say about it, except for just some minor things about Bess. But like, wow.
Yeah, it was something.
Do you want to talk about Bess?
Yes, always.
So Bess asks for the dress in a size 7. So Bess is a size 7.
Bess is a size 7, which is tiny. If you're not
is that not supposed to be sizes. Smaller than average?
Right, and that's a junior size because odd numbers are junior sizes. Right. So she's like on the small end of the smaller clothing that they make for women.
And yet her friends are constantly teasing her about her weight and her dieting or whatever.
They even describe her as
the 5 pounds heavier than perfect?
5 pounds heavier than perfect. What does that mean?
Oh.
What is perfect exactly?
Apparently 5 pounds less than whatever Bess weighs.
Right.
What the heck?
5 pounds heavier than perfect, but she's still wearing a tiny
She's a size 7. She's a size 7. I mean, like, it's bad enough. Saying that about anybody's size is bad enough. But the fact that she is literally smaller than the average girl at her age, it's just truly baffling as to where this is supposedly coming from. Like, it seems like absolutely, like, devastatingly horrible, you know?
Yeah.
To be fat shaming a girl who is so small already and like is clearly already so preoccupied about her size and is constantly dieting and trying to lose weight. It's like, what is going on?
It's like they picked an arbitrary quality about her to give
her
a hard time about. And it just so happened to be that one when it really doesn't apply. Even if it did apply, they still wouldn't have the right to do that.
Yeah. Wild. When I read that, I was like, I gasped out loud. I was like, 5 pounds heavier than perfect? Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? And then literally like a page later, they say she's a size 7. And I'm like, just one, like, like in the narrative, like all the comments that the people make to Bess are horrible and inexcusable about this kind of things. But the fact that the book, like the author of the book, like describes her in this way, talks about her in this way, just like really speaks to, I think, like where we were as a society in 1989, which is when this was published. Like, wow. No wonder eating disorders are like so rampant, especially at this time. Diet pills, I'm thinking about, like, all of that crap. Like, wow, no freaking wonder when girls are reading stuff like this. If you're a size 7, you're 5 pounds heavier than perfect. Better try for a 5.
Never mind that 5 pounds is like within the, the margin of error for actually measuring yourself, when it comes to numbers like that.
Yeah. It's rough. It's
yuck.
Rough. Yuck.
Hated that.
Yeah.
But they were pretty nice on Bess the rest of the story.
Yeah. It's really just at the beginning where they're talking about like Bess like loving shopping and all of that, but that it's kind of bad. But yeah, no, otherwise Bess and George don't have a massive role in it. They're just kind of Nancy's like segue to the mall, basically. We're like, okay, Nancy has to go to the mall, but Nancy can't go to the mall alone, I guess. She's got to have her girlfriends with her.
She wants to work on the mystery, but they force her to go to the movies. And so that's how she happens to see all her suspects at the movies at one time.
Yeah, it's very much like we're supposed to believe Nancy's not a normal girl. She's not do normal girl things. So her friends have to force her to be normal and to like shopping and the movies. I can't. Yeah. Anything else to say about Bess? Or Bess and George?
The 5 pounds heavier than perfect. Size 7.
Yeah. I do want to say, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that I think Ned is a massive doormat in this book.
Oh, yeah.
He just like absolutely lets Nancy walk all over him. And I am just like as exciting as reading all of the like sexy moments between him and Nancy were. I'm not here for this relationship anymore. Ned won't stand up for himself. And then, so this is case number 39. 2 Points to Murder is number 8. And like, literally, like, unless this is just Ned like trying to make up, which is like we're significantly farther away from that book at this point, where it seems like we should be past this by now, unless Ned is trying to make up for like his behavior. Then Ned needs to stand up for himself, because I feel like this is the reason why like they got into such trouble in 2 Points to Murder to begin with. Is like Ned feeling overlooked, and like Nancy doesn't care about him, and puts the mystery first. And Ned's just letting it happen in this book. He's just like, no, it's fine. Say something, Ned. This has caused you and Nancy to break up before. So be like, hey, Nancy, I really didn't appreciate the fact that you didn't even like give me a call. It's like heads up. While she was literally waiting at Jeremy Pratt's house for a full hour for Nikki. She didn't have time in that hour to pick up the phone and call Ned and be like, hey, sorry. Okay. Side note, I just realized, I just recognized the fact that this is in 1989 and we probably didn't have cell phones at this point. So Ned, she probably couldn't actually reach Ned while he was at the stakeout.
Thinking that. But still, if there was that hour that she was waiting, she could have gone to the mall, got him, and like come back or something, or at least let him know, and then like followed up with Nikki later on. There was no real reason she had to be at this party. She didn't have any reason at that point to believe that Nikki was in immediate danger. She just wanted to check on her and make sure she was okay. But her other two friends were right there.
Yeah.
And would have taken care of it. But Nancy decided that was more important. So I didn't like that. And like the day before their anniversary as well.
Yeah.
Which, side note, that does give us a little bit of a clue to the timeline here.
Oh, that's
1 year
true.
together means that a whole year has passed in Nancy's life, at least. So,
wait, so hold on. It's their anniversary, but they don't talk about how long they've been together, have they?
Mm-mm.
Okay, interesting.
But we know it's at least a year, right?
Right.
But is that a year since they first started dating in Clue in the Diary? Or is that a year since they got back together after breaking up in 2 Points to Murder?
Or, no, I'm saying, like, it's just their anniversary. So they could be 5 years in at this point. You know
right.
I mean, that would be weird because she's 18.
Yeah.
They didn't start dating when she was 13. So
they don't meet until she's 18 in book number 7, the original Nancy Drew mystery story. We also do get at the very beginning when she sees Dan and Nikki having their argument in the park or whatever. She's like, oh yeah, I remember Ned and I in the early days of our relationship. We had our squabbles back then as well. Did you?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Ned was very accommodating from like moment 1 to now.
Yeah.
Like,
all he wants to do is help you solve the mysteries.
Maybe she means 2 Points to Murder. Maybe she's making a reference to their squabbles in book 8.
Maybe.
Because that's like early days in the Nancy Drew files.
True. Yeah.
Interesting.
So did their relationship start over? Is there no mystery stories universe in the files universe?
I think there can't be. I think there can't be. Right? It doesn't make sense.
It's gone on too long now. She's like,
but also, okay, we've got to read Secrets Can Kill like soon because I got to figure out how they introduced these books. Because Nancy Drew, I mean, they did the same thing kind of in, I guess I don't really remember Secret of the Old Clock that much, but like Nancy Drew is just this established detective, and I just don't understand. I just don't understand what we're supposed to know about her origin story because it just seems very vague.
If I remember Secret of the Old Clock correctly, they do present it as it being her first mystery.
Right.
Or at least first thing that she solved on her own. I think they do imply that she'd helped Carson with a few of his cases in the past, but that, I mean, it's not really the same thing.
Yeah, so I wonder, like, because what I remember of Secrets Can Kill is that Nancy gets recruited to, like, act as a high school student in this high school, right? To, like, try to catch someone. So, like, if that's the case, then, like, they know who she is. Like, someone knows who she is.
Right. So she must be an established detective by Nancy Drew Files, book 1.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, well. I guess we'll find out. We'll find out at some point.
Yep.
So can we talk a little bit about the Nikki and Dan dynamic?
Yes.
So I just think there's an important point to put out. And we've definitely talked this to death before, potentially very recently. I think we talked about it in Stay Tuned for Danger. But let me pull up the page because I'm just going to read this little bit. So so I can talk about it. So Nancy is talking about Nikki and Dan. Her heart went out to him, and in that instant, she understood why Nikki Masters was attracted to Dan Taylor. There was something so innocent and so needy in those eyes.
Mm.
So Nancy says that she understands why Nikki is attracted to Dan because he is innocent and needy. So try to explain to me how this 19-year-old boy and this 16-year-old girl get together because she thinks that he is needy. This 19-year-old boy needs something from this 16-year-old girl.
I don't like that.
Nope. Mm-mm.
I've been very vocal about my dislike of large age gaps before. Okay. I'm a little bit more okay with this. It still could be a little sketchy. I mean, they're not necessarily, I mean, they could be like 2 years apart. Maybe he just turned 19 or something.
Right.
But he's too old to be needing a 16-year-old girl.
In any shape or form. Right. Like, I know that 19-year-old boys, or I guess technically men, are in no way emotionally mature. But like in no space, in no timeline or world or scenario should a 16-year-old girl be responsible for the emotional well-being of a 19-year-old boy.
Right.
I mean, in no time or universe should anyone be responsible for the emotional well-being of someone else. So like just the thought that like you can like anybody for being needy, I just find very upsetting.
Right.
Like, no.
It's not a helpless animal.
That's
an adult.
Full human being right there. Yeah.
Full adult man.
Full adult. Yikes. So, like, aside from, like, the age gap, and then also, like, aside from all the creepy, terrible, abusive behaviors, this is a terrible relationship.
Showing up at her house, sneaking around in the bushes, trying to force his way in.
No, that's honestly super terrifying. And, like, the thought that, like, Nikki still felt like she owed Dan something or that she wanted to help him in some way is incredibly concerning. Like the things that he is doing are like full on escalating behaviors. You know what I mean? Like he's essentially stalking her, like knocking on her house, trying to get in her house, trying to force his way into her house, jumping out at her.
And even when they're in the car, trying to like pull her back.
He grabs her. Yes. I agree with Nancy. Nancy, there's that moment where she says she gets like a chill down her spine about it. Dan, there's multiple moments where they talk about like, Nikki says, I don't think he's dangerous. Or whatever. And Nancy or Nikki's friends say like, yeah, but like, you know, you don't always know what a dangerous person looks like. And Nancy is like, I think you should break up with him. She says something about like not knowing, like people can escalate basically. And like, I like when I read this, I read like he's about to murder her. Like he's about to kill this girl for breaking up with him. Like that's what it reads as.
Desperate enough.
Yeah. And like just the idea that she breaks up with him, he doesn't say anything, asks her to get into a car with him. They drive off. He won't tell her where they're going. Then he pulls off into the middle of the woods. That is like frightening.
Well, first he makes a sketchy phone call that like apparently makes him very upset. And then she's still like, he still won't tell her where they're going. And then they pull off into the woods. That's terrifying.
That's like, you're going to get murdered.
Right. Who'd you call to come help you murder me? Like, that's what it feels like.
You know?
And then he's trying to grab her and force her to stay in the car, and she has to run back to the party.
Yeah. Yikes. We should probably put a content warning on this episode, too, for, like, abusive relationships, because it's really intense, honestly. It's a very intense portrayal of it. And we haven't even talked about Charlene and Tony.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's really controlling and mad at her for saying any little thing.
He won't let her talk to Nancy alone, y'all. textbook abusive boyfriend behavior. Like if a boyfriend won't let you have private conversations, won't let you have your own friends, like that's controlling abusive behavior.
And didn't Charlene say something like, "Oh, he's just looking out for me, just to make sure that I'm not." Well, she's not gonna. I mean, she didn't do the robbery, so she's not gonna like accidentally give herself away.
Yeah.
So what could she say that could possibly be so bad that he needs to be there?
No,
nothing.
Nothing. He just wants to control her behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah, he just wants to be a scary presence to scare her. Gross. And the comment that she makes about him, like not knowing what he's going to do if he finds out about her seeing someone else, like that's terrifying. That's almost like the exact same thing that's happening with Dan and Nikki, and that like, she wants to break up with him. He doesn't want to break up and like basically threatens her. And in this letter that he sends to her with the note being like that Dan sends to Nikki with the gift, he's like, my life is your gift. Like creepy. Yeah. Like I'll kill myself if we can't be together.
Huge red flag there.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. That's manipulative, and that is not true. If anybody says that to you, that is not true.
The police.
And you are not responsible for that person's committing suicide. All right?
We do also, speaking of Charlene, we do also have when Nancy catches Charlene and Max at the park and they're alibying themselves and Tony, and they mention that Tony was at the family reunion. Charlene says that, he's got all these cousins that can alibi him, each one meaner than the last.
Yeah.
What has this family done to you, Charlene? What happened?
I know, that's
my
scary.
goodness.
Yeah.
Not just Tony's being mean to her, but we can assume that the cousins have also been mean to her or have in some way been violent around her. Mm-hmm. That's scary.
Mm-hmm. There's also like something really poignant, I guess, or like scary, honestly, or just like vivid about the image of Nikki coming back to a house party being with her clothes torn and all scratched up and everything. Like that is very like reminiscent. I know in this book it's luckily not the case, but like that is very reminiscent of like a sexual assault scene. Like, and honestly, when you read that for the first time, like that's what you're expecting to have happened. And even Nancy and her friends are like, are you hurt? Like they don't say it explicitly, but like the subtext is there that they're like asking her like, have you been raped? Like, right. Are you
That's
okay?
Why I thought it was going, because even after she tells her story for Nancy and her two friends, Nancy pulls her aside and is like, hey, is there anything else that you didn't want to tell me that you just didn't want to mention before, that you didn't want to say in front of other people? And Nikki's just kind of like, no, what are you talking about? So I'm glad Nancy asked, because sometimes you wouldn't think to ask, and people sometimes need to be asked before they're willing to say it,
Right. So there's like a lot of that in this book. And they don't really talk about it like that explicitly. Like we don't talk about, I mean, like we obviously it's very present in the book, but like we don't get a lot of discussion about like, oh, that's really abusive behavior, Charlene. Your boyfriend is terrible. Or, I mean, there is some of that with Dan. Like we're worried about Dan, or we think Dan might be dangerous, but there's no like, this is something that abusive boyfriends do.
Here's why you shouldn't get back with him.
This is why you should not be alone with him. Like, but yeah, so there's none of that. And so I understand that this book was written in 1989. And so probably prior to a lot of like the social awareness around that kind of thing. But if I were to improve this book, that's what I would put in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just call it out.
Especially like considering that these books are supposed to be for teen girls. You know what I mean? It just seems like this is like this is a book for teen girls, about teen girls relationships. Like it seems like there needs to be some kind of responsibility here, like about how we're portraying those relationships and what we're saying about them. And while it definitely comes off as like, this is a bad thing, these are bad guys, we don't get like any kind of education. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Here's why it's bad.
Right.
Here's how it could end up going wrong for you and hurt you.
it would just be really great for Nancy as like a mentor. And there are many moments where it's possible for her to do so, to be like, Nikki, this is why I think this is really dangerous, you know, or like, this is something that happens, or I've seen this before, or like I had this friend, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel unusual for like the kind of 80s books either. There's a lot of like life lessons built into like books for teens at that time too. So I just think it should have happened.
If they're going to have these issues in the story, they need to have Nancy calling them out as well. Mm-hmm. Nancy is so big on miss right and wrong.
Yeah.
That she needs to call out that's wrong.
Right. I want to end on like a happier note.
I know.
Let's see. Oh, Bess makes a really great comment about Ned. That I have this theory now that Bess has a crush on Ned.
Oh, really?
It's very early on. It's like on page 4. Let's see. Nancy's talking about Ned being thoughtful and sweet. She's like bragging about him. And Bess says, "You're so lucky. If only they could clone Ned."
Oh, yes. Yes, I do remember that.
Like, Bess, so like you want Ned.
That's the long and the short of it.
I mean, I get it. I understand. It's just we're supposed to see Ned as like this ideal boyfriend, which he's so not. But we're supposed to see him as the ideal boyfriend, and so that's what Bess is remarking upon. But I just think, like, what an interesting choice of words. You want a Ned clone, Bess. Doesn't that mean you just want Ned?
Sounds like it.
I think Ned and Bess would be great together, honestly, because Bess is like super sensitive, and so Ned doesn't communicate classically. And so, you know, hopefully Bess would, one, help him come out of his shell a little bit, get him in touch with his feelings a little bit more, and also be able to be more sensitive when he doesn't speak up, you know? Right. Whereas Nancy is just not that way. Anyway, I don't know that I have anything else to say.
Should we talk about our next one then?
Okay. All right. Well, we got to give a score.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
How many flashlights?
This one?
I think I got to give it a 5.
Really?
I think I could give it 5 out of 5 flashlights. I just loved reading it so much. And yeah, there's stuff in there that's definitely problematic. There's always going to be problematic stuff in a Nancy Drew book. It just seems like we just can't get away from it.
Right.
I just enjoyed reading it so much. It was so good to read. It was so fun to read. It was just great. And like the mystery was like compelling. Like there was confusing stuff in there, clues that didn't add up. And I feel like a lot of the time it can just be like, oh, we don't know certain information, you know, early on. And it's just like adding information. Right. But this one is like conflicting information. And so that was really interesting to read about and like try to figure it out for yourself. And reading all of, you know, obviously all of the sexy scenes was real fun. I could just give it 5 out of 5 flashlights for that. It's just great.
Oh, good. I think I'll probably give it a 4.5 because there were those creepy moments, but it was a really good one. They deviated from the formula a little bit in this one. It wasn't as formulaic as some of the other books have been. As I said, they spoil like chapter 10 or 11 on the back of the book. So of course they have to break out of that a little bit. So there's other surprises that are thrown in along the way to keep it interesting. It's clever. I like the way it was done.
Yeah, it was great. It's great. I love it.
So do we want to announce our next one?
Yes. All right, regular Drews. So next up, we're going to do a little bit of a special episode. This is not exactly a Nancy Drew file. However, it is published in 1989, which is the exact same year our previous book was published. So we're going to be reading, drumroll, a Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys super mystery, Shockwaves. Oh, this is our first Hardy Boys introduction. This will be the first one that we've read with any Hardy Boys in it. So I'm very excited. So this book is also set in South Padre.
Which is in Texas, which is where we live.
Very
so it'll be fun to read something in our home state. Never been to South Padre, but
yeah,
it's supposed to be gross.
Gross spring break location.
Right.
I'm excited. I'm so pumped for this. I just love the idea of the Hardy Boys being, you know, like these mystery solving crime fighters alongside Nancy. So I'm very excited for Nancy to have some fellow industry professionals to speak to.
Yes.
That is what has really been lacking so far. So I'm just real excited to read that.
Love the Hardy Boys. Love the beach. This should be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And also, because this is our first episode of the month, don't forget to check our social media accounts tomorrow for our September puzzle.
So we'll see you then.
Yeah, see you then, regular Drews. Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you liked this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $1 level receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there,
thanks for listening.